Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Chax Training and Consulting. If you'd like your company announced during our podcast introduction, consider sponsoring our podcast transcript. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as Director of Training Solutions and Principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training Consulting. And Chad and I are certified as Accessible Document Specialist by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you would like your certification, head over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and check it out. There's some good training courses over there, some good information to help you kind of get started. So we love our friends over at IAAP.
Absolutely.
Chad, how you doing, man?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
Good.
The hurricane finally blew through here in the Northeast, and we had like 5 solid days of rain. I felt like we were in Seattle, but that has gone. We have a sunny day today, and tomorrow's Friday. So hey, life is good.
Yeah, you and I are desperately, are frantically preparing for our trip to LA to Adobe Max. I'm excited to be able to hang out with you again and to be presenting on, I'm going to be touching on all the different programs within the Adobe suite that have some form of accessibility feature. And today we have a special guest where we're going to be talking about one of those features, which is currently in the beta for Adobe Bridge. So I'd like to welcome Caroline Desrosiers to our program. Welcome, Caroline. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. Now, for those of you, our audience who don't know, you have a very unique job. Your full-time job is alt text, right?
That's right. Yep. That's what we do. That is our sole focus.
And you belong, your company is Scribely. That's the company you have. And tell us a little bit about what that is and what you provide. Sure.
So quick introduction to me. I'm Caroline Desrosiers, founder and CEO of Scribely. And what we do is exactly as Dax said, we describe images. We focus exclusively on writing alt text. So Scribely is essentially a group of writers dedicated to this specific accessibility requirement that has just been so challenging for so many people to get right. So that's exactly why we chose to focus on that. I started Scribely because I'm passionate about accessibility. I love writing. And I love working with writers. So it really just made sense all around. I'm also a member of a few associations, the IPTC, the International Press Telecommunications Council, the Book Industry Study Group, BISG, Digital Media Licensing Association, and also the W3C Silver Alt Text Subgroup. Very, very busy with all of that work as well.
Sounds like it. Sounds like you've got your plate full. Well, yes. We wanted to bring you on today to talk about some new things, but before we get to the new feature and the beta release of Adobe Bridge, why do you think it's so hard for people to write alt text? Why are people coming to you? What are some of the frustrations that you're hearing from your client base?
Absolutely. So writing alt text, I feel, is kind of deceptively simple, right? You can Google it and you can find numerous articles with the same 10 tips for how to write alt text, right? And you're like, okay, seems pretty straightforward. But then when you actually sit down to write, there really is a lot more to it. It depends on really what type of image it is, the level of complexity, and there really isn't a lot of guidance out there when you really get down to actually describing specific images. And I think that it can be an intimidating task for many people. Maybe they don't feel like they necessarily understand the accessibility requirements, or maybe they don't feel qualified to describe this specific subject area or the subject matter, and they just get stuck. So I think that could be one of the reasons. Another could be really just workflows, operations. There may be systems that they have in place, products, technologies that they're using that just don't make it easy for them to just right off the bat add alt text. The intention might be there at that company or that organization, but the systems may not allow for that. So I think that it can be a challenge on the content side of things and also a challenge on the workflow side of things.
Yeah, Carolyn, Dax and I, due to high request, we have created a webinar that we've put on a few times called The Secrets to Writing Effective Alt Text. And it really stemmed from exactly what you were saying. I mean, when you talk to people about writing alternate text, you're basically just like, well, you just need to describe this image, right? I mean, it sounds so deceptively simple. But when people sit down and try to do it, it's amazing how difficult it is, right? And what I really wanted to talk to you about, Carolyn, I always make this joke when I talk about writing alternate text, because Dax and I are asked to remediate files for clients, right? And I always say I am the worst person in the world to write alternate text for your project, right? Because in order to do so, I kind of need to become intimately familiar with the project, right? I mean, I literally need to read the brochure and understand the message that they're trying to convey, so that when I describe that image, it's done in a way that supports the text, right? And Dax and I always say, you can have the same image, but used in a different context, the alternate text is going to be different. So I'm really curious to know, what your process is. How do you handle that aspect of what you do?
Chad, are you asking her for her secrets of writing effective alt text?
Yes and no. I mean, it's more a curiosity thing. I mean, I'm not asking you to tell me any trade secrets, but I guess what I'm asking is, do you encounter those same challenges with what you do in your business and in your job?
Absolutely. Yeah. Context is one of the trickiest aspects to writing alt text. And, just really thinking about what is the purpose or the role that this image is playing on the page? Why is it here? What is the message that it's sending? Right? It feels very subjective, like you're trying to interpret something. And then it's difficult to decide, well, when have I collected enough information? When am I ready to describe this image?
Yeah.
So it can be a really difficult judgment call to make as an alt text writer. Absolutely.
And Carolyn, I'm assuming that's also why you don't charge 50 cents to write alt text for people's images.
That's right. So we are focused on doing this right the first time, and really creating a quality description that conveys that purpose and that meaning for users. Because really, when I examine alt text on the web, it just seems like we're not exactly getting there. Like it's overly simplistic or it's incomplete.
Oh.
It leaves a lot to be desired. And we would like to create a better experience for assistive technology users.
How do you feel about Microsoft Word's auto alt text generator?
Image of sunglasses is like the most popular description for everything.
If I have, 15 minutes to spare, and I want a good laugh, I turn that on because it can be quite entertaining. Well,
it really is.
How will AI describe this image right here? What does it have? And I mean, but you bring up, kind of an interesting point of, can AI describe images? And we're at kind of an interesting place with that. My personal opinion is that you need humans for this task. It's a very important task. But, there's a lot of exploration happening in that field at the same time.
Well, it's funny. Our good friend Mike Paciello, who is you know Mike, and Mike's an amazing guy, and he recently asked me to sit on a panel at M-Enabling this year where we're going to be talking about where we are in the utilization of auto accessibility, right? Like basically leveraging automated things. And it was funny because I was actually talking to my son yesterday, and we got on the topic of Facebook's data analytics and how incredibly complex and powerful those analytics are. And I said, it's a shame that we can't use that technology for the greater good, right? Because I can't imagine, you have this powerful engine. I have to believe that it could do a pretty amazing job when we're talking about things like auto tagging or auto generating alt text or auto anything. But the technology is just not being used in that way, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they're using it for things that make them billions of dollars, right? And I don't mean to segue here, but all I'm saying is that I feel like the technology is out there. It's just not being leveraged the way we need it to be done in our industry.
Well, Chad, I will tell you that if there is a plugin called Social Visual Alt Text, and I have it installed on my computer, and I've had it on. I'm getting ready to, little inside scoop here. I'm getting ready to write an article on my experience of having this on for about a month. And what's interesting is how terrible Facebook does, how terrible the Twitter and Instagram that do the predictive alt text do, white letters on a black background. And it's literally the opposite. And you're like, how do you get that wrong? So I think it's an interesting, I think that the possibilities there, but I think the focus isn't really, it's not important enough yet. It's like, why is, you and I get this all the time, Chad. Well, we have to do with this new accessibility thing. It's now this new, now that everybody's focused on this new rules about accessibility, you're like, no, it's been around for more than a decade. And, and so people just don't, it's not on top of mind. Right. And it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? Carolyn, they come to you because all of a sudden some agency has required meaningful alt text for some school textbook, or, I don't know what sources you get typically, but I got to imagine textbooks are in there. And all of a sudden now it's a thing, whereas before no one was really thinking about how do we describe the people in this image, or how do I describe this graph or chart or equation, right? Because we're still so far behind in mathematics. And so, I got to believe you get a lot of that.
Absolutely. And really, this needs to be considered from the very beginning of the content publishing process. Whether you're a textbook publisher or you're creating a website or really any form of content, you need to be thinking about accessibility from the very beginning. So we really advocate for born accessible images. The very first time they're added to the web, it's your responsibility to make them accessible and to figure that out within your own operations. And if that's not possible, if you don't have the bandwidth, the time, the budget, whatever, it's a problem to solve. And there are companies like Scribely out there that can help you if that's really not possible to do in-house. So the goal we should all be pursuing is everything is accessible right when it's published, especially when it comes to content.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I know that you were instrumental in getting WordPress to recognize alt text or descriptions in metadata automatically when they're uploaded to WordPress. And you brought up a very good point, a born image. If I'm creating my website, everybody knows people borrow images from everywhere else. And what better way to virally grow the common practice of having alt text than to embed it at first use? I put a picture of a eyeglass or a magnifying glass on my website, and I put alt text in it, and someone says, hey, I want that image. They grab it off of my webpage or they inspect it and get it. It's got that metadata embedded in it, right? Can you talk about your experience in getting that whole thing kind of pushed forward? Because it hasn't always been the case, right?
Absolutely. That journey really began because I was trying to find ways to pass Scribely alt text to our clients more efficiently, right? So is there a method other than a spreadsheet or a document or something that's detached from the image? Can we actually just send the image? So I started doing a lot of research on metadata. I personally have a metadata background, working in book publishing for many years. So naturally, I explored that option and I discovered, wow, well, we can embed quite a bit of metadata in images. And some of these fields are descriptive. There's a field called description and headline and title and all of these wonderful fields that people have to populate. But none of them really match up or align nicely with alt text because alt text really is its own type of description. So the journey began really for that reason. But then I kind of saw this potential, this opportunity to help solve some of those workflow problems I mentioned at the beginning, where we're making alt text easier on folks. As we pass images from A to B, it's always easier to start with some sort of description and adapt it from there rather than to just be, starting from scratch. So I think for we think about sustainability and human generated descriptions. I believe that it is possible if we have the proper networks and systems and technologies in place where we are preserving those human generated descriptions and passing them to others.
Caroline, it's great to hear you say that accessibility has to start at the beginning, because Dax and I preach it, right? I mean, I swear to God, every podcast we mention that accessibility has to start at the beginning and not at the end. And it's just nice to hear another colleague say the same thing, that we're not out the left field and that somebody else agrees with us. It's good stuff.
Well, I developed a script. You talk about the metadata outside of the image and that whole problem, and also starting with accessibility from the beginning. And, I was at a frustrating point because I was working with a large publication. It was hundreds of pages with literally 100 or more charts and graphs and stuff. And trying to get the teams that created those to develop the alt text and get it to me in a way that I was copying and pasting from a Word doc or an Excel file into InDesign. And I grabbed the wrong line, and where was I? And did I miss one? And all of the struggles that went on there. And so I worked with a good friend of Chad and I, Luis, and I always get his last name wrong. I always say it's Corleone, but I'm sure that's not how you say it. But Luis is my great friend, and he worked with me to develop a script for InDesign that actually will take all the images inside your InDesign file, suck them out into an Excel file that I can then pass on to people who are far better at writing alt text than me, and then in a click, bring it back in. So it solves part of the issue that you're talking about, but not all of the issue, in that how could I inject that en masse into those images? Now my brain is thinking, could we create a script for Bridge that could take my Excel file and dump it into Bridge and get it? Boy, that would be hot. My geek brain is going right now.
We desperately need technology solutions that support accessibility.
Yeah.
These are the reasons, I think, a lot of the times, as we were talking about, it just doesn't happen, right? It's just too much of a barrier to overcome. And we need to really think about our publishing workflows and the way that we're creating content. And if we're using certain providers that are not supporting accessibility, you should ask. You should ask them that, really, you're not supporting me in creating accessible content. There's really a hang up at this point in our process, and we need your help. What can we do? And then it becomes, these technology providers are hearing that demand from their clients. This is how we make change. You have to speak up when things aren't working.
Well, what's interesting is you bring that up. I actually have been looking for a social media posting, a way to automate my social media, some of my social media posts. And one of the biggest drawbacks is finding one that allows you to inject alt text in the post that's waiting to be published. And I actually did reach out to a couple of companies and said, hey, are you planning on adding alt text? I need this ability. And some of them were like, oh, if we get enough requests, then maybe we'll think about it in the future. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I don't want to have this argument right now. Thank you for your time. And then the others were, it's on our radar. We're working on it, but it's just not out yet. Just keep following us. So
that's a painful response, isn't it?
Yeah.
But talking about technology, right? I mean, talking about, getting technology to work for us, right? And this is an area that's kind of near and dear to, my heart, and I think Dax's too. I mean, Adobe InDesign, one of my favorite programs. It is my favorite program. Who am I kidding? But InDesign has the ability to grab alt text from a metadata field that exists inside of an image. And like, I really feel like Word needs to get on the ball and add that feature as well, right? I mean, if I can grab metadata from an image, I mean, I think that would just be, it's just such a great workflow, right?
Right.
Because it allows, it has potential to give the person who should be writing the alt text the ability to do so directly into the image. And then me as a designer can pull that metadata out and leverage it as I'm designing. Now, as we're talking about this feature, can you see the drum roll happening? Right, we're kind of like building up here, but that feature has existed in InDesign for quite some time. But you always had to pick a field and say, okay, I'm going to use the description field for my alt text, or I'm going to use the headline field for my alt text. You always had to kind of choose a placeholder for your alt text, and leverage that and hopefully be consistent during that process, because God forbid one person's putting it in the headline field and another one in the description, then everything gets all wonky.
I'll do you one better. I use them both, and I use one for a short description and one for a longer description. So I'll use the title for my like literally as brief as I can possibly be. And then the description, I'll maybe be more verbose, or I'll have one version that's focused on one message and one version that's focused on another. But to your point, if I'm the one inserting that image, I know which one I want to use. But if I pass that image to someone else, how do they know which one is the right one to use? So while it's a good workflow for me, it's definitely not a good workflow overall in a group environment. But to let the cat out of the bag, right? Carolyn, tell us what this new thing is with Adobe Bridge.
It's very exciting. Let me back it up just a little bit. To kind of give an introduction to what these metadata fields we're talking about actually are. So one of the reasons I'm a member of the International Press Communications Council is that they are actually the ones that create the photo metadata standard, the information that we can embed in images. So these fields that Dax, that you were mentioning, headline and description / caption, those are IPTC metadata fields. And about a year ago now, we explored the possibility of adding alt text and extended descriptions or long descriptions to that photo metadata standard. And as a way to have two dedicated fields that are exclusively for accessibility purposes. So that was actually approved 1 year ago.
Yay.
And those fields were added to the photo metadata standard, making it possible for technology providers to actually make this available to their clients. Now, since then, I've been on a mission to talk to as many providers as I possibly can on the side of everything else, and get them to adopt these new accessibility fields so we can truly create an ecosystem across technology providers. Adobe has been there since the very, very beginning, thinking about these solutions, recognizing the potential. They were actually presenters at the Photo Metadata Conference where we announced these properties. And very excited to announce that they are now supporting these properties, alt text accessibility and extended description accessibility within their programs. So round of applause for Adobe, because truly, they are supporting this effort of helping people manage their alt text and their extended descriptions in a better way, in a more organized way that actually connects across systems for the first time.
Yeah. Well, you and I were. Go ahead, Chad.
Well, no, but I mean, to kind of like go along with what you're saying, like we now have an alt text field in the IPTC section of the metadata in an image. And then we can also grab that metadata field. So we don't have to masquerade within another field anymore. We actually have an alt text field that we can say, this is where the alt text goes. And hopefully that eliminates a lot of confusion and frustration for people who are, in the workflow that we're discussing.
Absolutely. And it also enables you to use that description field for its actual intended purpose. The definition of description by IPTC is really the who, what, when, where, why of an image, the facts about an image. And oftentimes that's the visible caption that appears below the image. So you can put that descriptive information there and then put your alt text in a dedicated field that's exclusively for that purpose. So it also enables you to use the fields as they were intended.
That's great. And is there a place somewhere that users can go to see what the definitions are of those metadata fields? Is there a website or something? I know I kind of put you on the spot here, but that would be great to know what are these fields actually really for. I actually was looking in Photoshop the other day and noticed that there's a bunch of medical metadata fields that I had never even seen and didn't really think about it, but makes perfect sense that they exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can put this link in the show notes for this episode, but IPTC does have very detailed specifications that include definitions, as well as the implementation notes, the labels, the XMP specs. Everything you'd want to know about these new fields and how you can implement them are on this page that we'll link to.
That's awesome. We'll link to that in the show notes on chaxchat.com. I also wanted to say, we were talking a little bit offline, kind of prepping for the show. And I learned, I love having guests on, and I love chatting with Chad because I always seem to learn something new. I know that you can right click on an image, or you can go into an image inside Bridge and get to the metadata properties and add that in there. But you blew my mind by talking about Illustrator. And I didn't even think of this, but in the file info properties of Illustrator, you can go in, and I got to believe in the Photoshop as well, you can go in and set the metadata there. What I would always do is export my image to a PNG or JPEG, then right click on the image and go to properties and add it, or I'd open it in Bridge and, add it there. I never thought about adding it actually in the file info of the source file, which was just like mind blown.
Absolutely. If you're managing images, these are really popular programs. Right. So many people love to use Illustrator. So it's important that those fields are there as well, to give that creator the opportunity to write their own alt text to describe their images. And then from there, they can package that within their image file and then send it off to wherever, they're posting that. Maybe it's a website, or maybe it's a gallery, maybe it's an image archive. That information stays with their image and gets sent out to wherever they're posting their images.
Well, so I mean, I think that's an important concept for everybody to understand, and that is that, Adobe Bridge is fundamentally a file browser. And when you click on an image or a graphic within Bridge, it is kind of like, how do you want to say it? It's like a portal into the metadata of that file, right? So, I mean, you could click on an image and instantly see all the metadata fields in that file. But that same metadata is available inside of all of the applications, Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, I'm guessing Premiere and those other applications have it as well. But in all those applications, you can go to the file menu and choose file info, and that will also open the metadata window where you will not only see the metadata, but you can also add metadata to that file. It's honestly similar in Microsoft Word. You go to the file menu and click on info, and that's where you can see all the metadata fields for that file. However, Word is not using the industry IPTC standard to store that metadata. So, arguably not as useful. However, it's very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. So, calling out Microsoft, calling out Google, calling out Apple. I'd love to talk to you about supporting IPTC.
Amen. Amen.
But yeah, when we think about the workflows here, right? What Adobe has enabled us to do is to import any existing metadata related to alt text and actually make that visible within their programs. Number two, they've given you the ability to edit that metadata, to adapt it, to create a new description, should you choose to do that. And then they've created the ability to export that metadata, to send it out into the world, onto the next provider, to package that image with that adapted metadata for use in the next application of that. Now, if you took that image and you dropped it into Microsoft or Google or Apple, that description wouldn't appear because they're not importing that alt text that was created by that original team who was managing the metadata. So really, we need support across the board to actually be able to really pass our descriptions from A to B. We need the technology providers behind this.
I think one of the biggest frustrations for me is in some versions of Word, and I can't remember exactly how this happens, but there is an opportunity when someone puts in a description that it exports that alt text into the actual text and alt text field when you generate the PDF. And I'm just like, at first I was like, guys, I would tell the people that I would get the file from, hey, please don't just pick one, just do alt text or actual text. And they're like, we're just doing descriptions. And then I did some research and found out that I forget which way it was exporting or if it was an older version or whatever, but there's a way to export out a Word where you end up with both fields populated. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? Can we just... Yeah,
I think it was really smart on Adobe's part. And there's a lot of really smart people working for Adobe, but they had a lot of foresight, right? And they embraced XMP, right? And if you're not familiar with that, XMP stands for Extensible Metadata Platform, right? And it's basically a universal way of storing metadata in a file, right? And Adobe embraced that from, well, I don't want to say from day one, but they've been embracing it for quite a long time. And we've had these metadata fields available to us. And it seems like, that they're just starting to be leveraged more and more, in the last couple of years.
What's this new accessibility thing, Chad, right? It's this new thing we're doing, right?
Now that our files are supposed to be accessible, I remember somebody said that in one of my classes. They're like, well, now that files are supposed to be accessible, I'm like, wait a minute, that's 25 years old. Yeah. That was 25 years ago that became law, so it was interesting. But I think it's just it's great for us to talk about this and talk about the possibilities and hopefully helping other people devise and develop a workflow that allows them to just work more efficiently, all in all.
So, Caroline, as we close out, I want to ask you about your business model, because I think it's interesting in itself. In that I've used Fiverr, I've used Rev, and Rev.com, for people who don't know, Rev does transcription and captions, and they use a Hive mentality to have people edit and create captions and translations and that. And tell us, your business model kind of follows that same kind of thing, right?
Yes. So we've chosen to focus on a few specific industries. We write for education, e-commerce, entertainment, and cultural heritage. And the reason why we focus on those specific industries is because they need a lot of support when it comes to writing alt text. But we have a team of writers that are prepared to describe these images, to provide a full service across these industries. Basically, what Scribely is a team of writers that meets the demand of our projects and is assigned based on their subject area of expertise and the timeline of the project and the quota and everything, a number of different factors. They're assigned to the job, they're matched to the job, and then they are dedicated to that task. You have a human actually writing your descriptions and looking at your surrounding context and taking everything in consideration and writing the description properly. So Scribely is focused on really not only not checking that box, really going beyond compliance and thinking about the user experience and improving and really breaking down that visual access barrier that exists on the web when it comes to images. We want to help and work with those clients that are really motivated to improve their diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And they want to show their customers and their clients that they are fully committed to this and that they are not only just seeing accessibility as a box to check, but they are thinking about providing a great experience.
Well, it's interesting. I of course I follow you on LinkedIn, and anybody listening should be following Carolyn on LinkedIn. But you just posted something today about you're hiring an alt text writer. So do you provide training, or how does someone who wants to get in this, we get this question, sorry, that was like 3 partial sentences in a row. We get questions all the time asking people who are in the accessibility field who want to branch one way or another, take a different direction. They're tired of tagging. They want to do something else. What are some of the options? Talk to us about the hiring process or the qualifications process and what you do maybe to give these people more training, or, talk about that a bit.
Absolutely. So we are, yes, hiring. I'm always looking for fantastic alt text writers. So even if we're not hiring, I would encourage you to reach out to me and to tell me that you're interested in doing this work. I would love to hear from you. But we're really looking at the projects that we have in the queue that are coming in the next several months and looking at hiring someone that's dedicated to those specific subject areas. So we're constantly growing our team, as I said, to meet the demand. But when writers actually join Scribely, there is a Scribely approach, and it is our own internal style guide that I'm not willing to share right now or anytime
No, that's
soon.
okay. But do you, so they go through kind of a training, like a boot camp of doing it the Scribely way. Is that kind of how things go?
Exactly. Yeah. And we want to make sure they are as prepared as possible when they encounter these images that they're going to describe. And it's different for across, the way we're describing content, educational content is different than the way we're describing artistic content. We have different writers for those tasks. So we help them kind of recognize, well, this is our process for these types of images. So we're providing that very specific training, going much further beyond the top 10 to, just all the details that you would need to know to write a description properly.
Awesome. Well, your last name is Desrosiers. So for those people who listen to Desrosiers and wonder exactly how to spell that, find her on LinkedIn, follow her posts. We are so happy to have you on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure. Chad and I just, we love being able to talk to other people that speak our language, and you definitely fit that. So thank you so much.
I was just thinking, I hope I run into you at a conference somewhere, Carolyn, and we could just geek out about, accessibility in general. It's great talking with you, and it was great to just hear your insight into, your approach to writing alt text. And it's also really cool is to hear that, you're making a living writing alternate text, right? That is pretty cool. That is honestly a really cool thing to say. So, kudos to you and keep up the great work. And once again, thanks for being on the podcast with us today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you as well for letting me nerd out with you about alt text. I couldn't think of a better way to spend the afternoon. And I just want to, kind of a parting message to everyone. This work is not impossible. We can do it together. We can absolutely figure it out. Your images are definitely worth it. So let's describe them.
Awesome. Thanks again, Caroline, for joining us on today's podcast. And once again, we want to thank Chax Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode. And just remember, if you're looking for in-person or online training or struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head on over to accessibilityunraveled.com to learn more. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.